Hello, friends. I'm Stephanie, and I'm here to welcome you to the first episode of Sacred Sounds, the One License Team's educational podcast to help you learn more about sacred music, old and new. In this episode, we kick off the series with Davin's interview of composer-arranger Bradley Sowash. Madison tells us about what public domain songs are and how you can use them in your worship. And Siobhan teaches us how to search the One License database. Thanks for coming on this journey with us. The One License team had a blast creating this episode, and we just hope that you have as much fun listening to it. It's time for Creators Commentary, where we interview composers, authors, and arrangers of sacred music.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Sounds Creators Commentary. I'm here with Stephanie, and we're here today with our guest, Bradley Sowash. Bradley, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to helping you kick off this podcast and sharing some of my background and how I got into writing church music and what I like about it. And very happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you here, too. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, usually a lot of interviews open with tell us about your musical background. I turned 65 this year. I've been playing music since I was 5 and at least, 30 years of performing and so on. And so the point is, we could spend the whole time doing a bio, which is not what we want to do. So I thought I'd just hit some 3 sort of landmarks along the way, which is my 3 biggest sort of influences are family and professional work. And before that, educational work. Should have done it in order. Family, educational work, and professional. What I mean by that is I did have the good fortune to grow up in a musical family where we had, a mom that was very prescriptive about take your piano lessons and do the usual. But on top of that, she did a lot of guided listening with us. One of my favorites was Appalachian Spring, where she'd say, now listen to the little birds twittering and get us kind of beyond the wallpaper effect of music just in the background and really more deep listening or just listen to one section. What are the cellos doing? And get really woke our ears up as my 2 brothers and I. And she was a improv big band person. My Uncle Joe, her brother had a band, and she met my dad back there. For those of you who might be able to see this, and if the video is preserved, I have my dad's trumpet that he bought when he was 16 years old, and she sang, and they met playing in a 10-piece band back when 10-piece bands were busy. There was so much live music work. They played all over the place, and then my older brothers, when I was 8 years old, my oldest brother was off to college as a composition major at Indiana University, and he was sharing some of the things he learned there. And meanwhile, my other brother was playing in a band called Live in the Blues, doing, society or casual gigs. So those were all kind of pouring into my youth. So that would cover family. And then the second thing was a big influence on me was that in music school, being a composition major with a piano minor was a little bit dry. Kind of seemed like a lot about studying counterpoint and all. It sort of was the intellectual side of music, and I wasn't getting enough of the feel, the spirit of music. And I wandered over to the dance department and found out that they needed pianists to improvise for their modern dance classes as well as play written music for their ballet classes. That was a huge influence on me and provided me with a lot of income over the next 20 years or so. And I met my wife, who was a dance teacher, doing that. And the difference was dancers say, well, you need music right now with kind of a peanut buttery feel, whatever that might mean. I guess they meant adagio. And you had to just turn on the faucet and play. And that really got my improvisation gears running, not just improvising over jazz solos, but coming up with music all together, new chords, new melody, and everything that fits the feel of what they wanted to do. So it was very influential for me. And the last part was being a professional performer, which I did for 30 years, doing gigs, mostly gigs, and also concerts. Concerts always get written up in the bio, but any musician that makes a living does a whole host of things. And so I have done it all, really, with that performing. We could talk about that later. I can't think of a setting I haven't played in. Eventually, I did 9 recordings, 4 or 5 of them which were sacred music. And my first one led to being published by Augsburg Fortress Press, and then now self-publishing. And it kind of opened up a whole world of arranging hymns and spirituals, which are really fun. So I would say that's a thumbnail of my background: family, dance, class experience. You probably didn't see that coming, and just playing in a host of settings.
You know, what strikes me, having listened to such a varied background, and like I want to dig into some of that later, but from all of those experiences, how did you enter the sphere of arranging sacred music?
It was a little bit by accident. Yes, I am churched and grew up in the church and all that, but a lot of church arrangers and church musicians are really defining themselves as that. I am a church musician. That's not the case with me. Like I said, I've played in so many settings. I mean, I'm talking circuses and society things and weddings and bar mitzvahs and concerts and jazz clubs, and I mean, I could go on and on. What happened was I got kind of burnt out on what I'll call the gigs, the casual things.
Yeah.
I got more and more feeling like I was talking on the phone without dialing first, in the sense that it was often playing in settings where the music was secondary. It was more about the man in the tuxedo behind the piano than what he was playing. And that started to hurt. And then I started to not care and play a little less intently. I play with a lot of passion when I play. Often my eyes are closed and I'm weaving, and that started to not matter, and it just really started to hurt. And I decided at one point I would not play any more music in a setting where people weren't listening, which greatly cut down my income. I ran into a politics and theology aside, I'll use the word progressive, just meaning an open-minded, visionary preacher who said, what would you think about doing a jazz service in my church? And I thought, well, there's a place people listen, and that they want something to happen. So I did that, and it led to a monthly jazz service over the next 6 years, and all kinds of invitations to visit other churches and going to church conferences and so on. And then I ended up arranging so much church music and playing it that eventually I made a recording, my first one. And as I mentioned earlier, one day I got a call from Augsburg Fortress, a Lutheran publisher of sacred music, and they said, well, what do you think about writing this down? Because I tend to work from just lead sheets and chords and and so just quick aside here, I wrote it all down exactly as it was on the album, and I sent it in, and they said nobody could play this. And I said, I can't play it. They said, well, you did play it. I said, because sometimes you throw off that I have no idea what I just did.
Right, 100%.
So we kind of cleaned that up a little bit and made it a little bit more playable, though it remains my most difficult collection of sheet music. I got wiser on the future ones and wrote it a little more with a friendly tip of the hat to the musician who's going to play it, but then took my own liberties when I recorded it. Yeah. So that preacher, I went to his retirement about 2 months ago. He's just started to move into full-time writing and no longer serving a service, and it was, we talked a lot about that. That was a real pivotal point in my career that he opened that door for me.
Yeah.
Arranging is such a different ballgame than composing. Can you talk about the merits and challenges that arranging offers versus sitting down and writing something on the paper?
I'm not sure exactly what I think about this, but I was playing in a black church with one of the pianists who well, I guess I'm kind of like that, who can just make music flow out of her fingers, and she'd been doing this a long time, and we were talking about why some of these spirituals, and to a lesser degree, but certainly a large degree, Anglican hymns and German hymns and things like that, are just goosebumpy. You know, what is it about the tune that makes this so wonderful? What is it that makes it sacred besides the fact that it's written in a book or the lyrics are available? And she said, well, that music is anointed. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means, but I took it to mean so many people are inspired and working with tunes over and over and handing them down, especially spirituals. And the rough edges and the individuality, in a good way, gets worn down to the essence of these tunes. And even though everybody would sing something like Down by the Riverside with their own little variations, which is a good thing, we have that pithy, already swinging, already toe-tapping music going on, and that's gold to an arranger. So I look for those sacred hymns and spirituals that lend themselves to reinterpretation and reimagination. So just for an example, Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. I'm not going to arrange that, right? Beethoven did a good job with that. It's all just fine as it is. But something like, well, Amazing Grace is one I was playing at the beginning. You know, can be all beautiful like that, or it can all be rocking. And so that's because the tune has such integrity. And that's true of so many spirituals and the real classic hymns. Just as an aside, one of the fun things about church music is that most of it is public domain, so that also has an arranger's delight. But lately I've been having a lot of fun arranging classical war horses. I'm working on one right now called Flight of the Bumblebee. Flight of the Latin Bumblebee.
Yes.
So instead of going, let's see. You know, kind of having fun with turning Rimsky-Korsakov into a jam.
Yeah.
And then I did like Smooth and James Bond theme, Pink Panther. Surfing USA has been popular this summer. I've just been having fun taking silly old classic tunes, a little bit from the classical world. I also have a whole fun thing with called Ellingtoven, which is based on the premise that what happens if Duke Ellington and Beethoven collaborated? What might it sound like? And then just those pop tunes that people are always looking for. I have one of the things. A lot of the published music for like Pink Panther, Henry Mancini, a fellow Ohioan, wrote. They often leave out the cool middle part, and I'm always careful to put those back in and do something new with it. I have a whole book of great German hymns, another one of great English hymns, and because I'm coming out of the jazz and popular or secular world, those took a little more time to find the wrinkle. I grew up Lutheran, in which the sort of anthem of all Lutherans is "A Mighty Fortress" that Martin Luther wrote. And I found it with my arrangement of that, but it took a while to get inside of it and come up with a Bradley approach to it that wasn't necessarily inherent in it. So to answer your question, Stephanie, for me, arranging is getting under the hood, I guess, of what makes a tune so powerful, and also what I call looking for the wrinkle. What can I say about this that hasn't already been said many times in many ways? So it's familiar styles, but in another hand, you probably haven't heard this tune with quite that twist on it before, and that's what I look for.
Out of my curiosity, when you are rearranging these songs, are you mostly sticking to like the harmonization that's there? Or are you like going crazy and not going crazy, but like you being a little wild and reharmonizing a lot of these hymns?
Yes, it starts with reharmonization for me.
Yeah.
As a jazzer, it's pretty rare for me to want to play a 3-note triad. I'm always at least going to put a ninth or a seventh or something in it, or even there's my opening chord for Amazing Grace that I just messed around with. What do I have here? I'm just looking at here. G13, yeah. And, so that kind of reharmonizing is often where it starts. And the second part of that wrinkle is finding the feel
Yeah.
that makes it work. And I'm a drummer as well, so I can access those feels that a drummer might play, and I can think in feels. A lot of pianists maybe don't really know what it means when it says halftime shuffle, which is kind of a gospel standard, and so being able to access those. But it depends, and also a lot of times I'll look for going backwards from it and pare it down to the like how little can I play at least for a section.
Yeah.
So it's reharmonizing and thickening, but sometimes it's bringing it down. It's we can talk about the musical sides of it, but the question I always look for is what will resonate, what feels, what gives chills, what will be compelling. So all the things when we talk about harmonization and feels and arrangements, those are tools. That's the craft.
Yeah.
But it starts here. It starts in the heart.
Yeah.
What will convey that? What tools do I have that will convey that? So I have to fall in love with the tune to make it my own.
Yeah. That's awesome. Beautiful. And then going into that more or expanding a little bit on that, talking about the heart of music, if you with your jazz background, what benefits do you think church musicians can get from a person like you coming from a jazz background entering that sphere? Like what lessons can we church musicians, quote unquote, right? Like whether we call ourselves church musicians, what can we most benefit from if we were to get together with a jazz musician like yourself?
Thank you for that question. Of course, it's always risky to put everybody in a box.
Right.
But it's true that most church musicians are classically trained, in my experience, depending on the denomination and neighborhood and state and all that, location. And classically trained musicians talk out of both sides of their mouth about jazz. On the one hand, it's less and less so, but at least when I was coming up, it was kind of illegitimate to play jazz or improvise. It was you fake it, you know what I mean? And even jazz musicians that growing up would refer to non-jazz music as legit music. Well, on the other half, or the other thought for a classically trained musician, and I know this because I teach recovering classical musicians, which I say lovingly all the time, and there's a strong desire to want to improvise and to make those sounds that they hear in a club or a looser setting. One of the things that I work hard at is trying to notate the sound of what an improviser might play. But the other part of it is, and I mention this to every church musician or who wants to play my sacred arrangements, if I meet them or shake their hands, it's standard for me to say, my notes are not scripture. At least with my music, please take liberties, either to make it easier or because you have a different idea there.
Yeah.
For years, I've toyed with the idea of having gray notes. If there was some way to notate not black and white, but somewhere gray, as if to say, yeah, you can play this or something similar.
I love that.
Yeah. So take those liberties and don't worry about it. The groove is everything. Make it toe tapping, and nobody's going to care about a note here and there. It didn't go the way you wanted. But now I'm talking from my jazz teacher hat. So
Yeah, totally.
Well, let's go in the teacher vein. For me, I think the thing that I would wrestle with jazz students is how do you balance the freedom that's necessary to improvise freely and be creative with, at the same time, here are the, quote unquote, do's and don'ts of proper playing, of music making. How do you balance that need for freedom with the need for structure?
I guess I would say you don't have to be a genius or know a lot to begin to improvise. G pentatonic scale, let's order it from, instead of in root position, D, E, G, A, B. I guess in root position, to do a little lesson here, would be G, A, B, D, E, okay? But if you put your hand down on the piano, D, E, G, A, B, and just mess with that, check it out. That was the same 5 notes, just grooving on it. And so the reason that question arises is because for most of us, we've heard jazz in recordings or in professional settings where the musicians are spectacular. So all jazz musicians grow up under the shadow of Art Tatum and Oscar Peterson, knowing we will never be as technically capable as those, monsters as in masters. There's a little slang there. It's my strong belief that it can start simply. In fact, I'll just hold this up. I have a 9-book jazz series. This is my very beaten copy I'm holding up for those of you can see it. It's book 1. It's called That's Jazz, and it's, according to my publisher, the best-selling jazz piano method in the world. And when you tell that to jazz players, they're like, what? I never heard of it. Well, the reason is that it's oriented to about an 11-year-old kid to start with, and then it builds up. And it does a lot of hand-holding for teachers. So there's warm-up pages that, in a way, you can interpret as a lesson plan. And there are going further pages which say, okay, you can play the tune now play it your way. Here are some things to try. So there's a lot of appeal in a book that is simple enough to make compelling music with just a few rules, one at a time. But Stephanie, your question is that I hope that the lessons learned in my teaching and in my books follow the student beyond the tunes. So, you learn the pentatonic scale that I just showed as just one possible example. It's not like when the tune's over, you close the book and forget about that. That's almost more important than the tune. I want you to carry those bag of tools, they have different names, along with you. Does that get at your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. It feels like the key then is kind of setting the limits before time. And by limits, we mean those tools that you're talking about, the pentatonic scale. And then in the moment of improvising, then it's, go crazy within those parameters.
That's beautifully said. Yes, their borders or barriers or limitations are definitely creativity boosters. Just if I said, take a piece of white paper and draw something, to a second grader, what? But if I said, try to draw an apple, every apple's going to look different, but we've got some kind of, it may be a cubist apple or a scribble apple, but we've got somewhere to go. And that actually ties back into your arrangement question. It's I love to compose, but it is a lot more pressure to come up with something that's compelling, well-arranged, playable, and all that from scratch. One parameter that the arranger already has is that tune itself. You have to make at least most of it recognizable, even if you're twisting it around. So I find that barriers or boundaries or limitations, I think most artists would agree, are really helpful. So, and we could go on and on, Stephanie. There's more to it than just improvising on pentatonic. I mean, there is wonderful, cool things to do with chords and all that, and that's my stock in trade, is teaching that stuff. So, I think a lot of people have run into jazz with non-educators. A lot of times jazz teachers have been playing a lot, but they haven't really studied pedagogy or understood how people learn. Mm-hmm. And so that gets, there can be even just the jargon. Hey, why don't we comp on this while we jam on a blues scale? And what does all that mean? So a lot of it is being able to translate what you do to bring it back into cognition. In other words, what seems to you that it is intuitive is only intuitive because it once was a factual thing in your head, like a prescribed scale. And then now it's intuitive, and the good teacher figures out, well, what was that initially? How do I present that? So, yeah, you opened up a can of worms there with education. That's mostly what I do right now, is teach. So I can talk a lot about that. But that's not really the point for your listeners, I suppose. Although, of course, all church musicians and all musicians are lifelong learners. So, that's the nature of our art form.
Right, 100%. And we're here to learn more about you, Bradley. So there's no pointless talk around here, or like sideways talk. Okay. But you also mentioned that you do love composing. Let's talk about how you start composing something. I know that you like, as a jazz musician and a person who likes to create based off of feel. How do you turn that feel into something concrete, like a musical composition?
It depends on your intent. Let me back up a little bit. When I was a kid, I actually, in preparing for this interview, I looked through my sketchbooks. I still have them here. I know that people can maybe see this, but I thought I was going to get the question about what was the first thing you ever composed, and I'm pretty sure I found it here in my little manuscript book. The first thing, like carefully notated and all that, it says 1976 on it. I was 16 years old, probably noodling around before that. And then I carried around for years book after book after book when I lived in New York City. I had a 5-line pen, and I wrote those 5 lines on there ahead of time, and then wrote on the subway, wrote in Central Park, wrote when the dance teachers were showing some dancing that where the music wasn't required, as well as written notes. So I kept those sketchbooks going all the time. And the reason for that, in a way, was because I thought, well, my original desire was to be the next Gershwin or Bernstein or Aaron Copland. And right out of music school, I got my new haircut, and I had my box of hand-notated compositions, and went to New York City to make my splash. And I quickly learned that I might have mentioned earlier, you have to be able to do a lot to be a musician, unless you're a star. So what's true for Leonard Bernstein is true for who you want to pick, Elton John, Jennifer Lopez, whoever your latest. If you're there at the top of the popularity game, you can do one thing. But for the rest of us, especially those of us who don't sing or conduct, you need to wear many hats. And so I quickly learned that. But I actually have just as an aside, I have a framed letter from Aaron Copland here. I wrote to him as a teenager, and it's written on a typewriter. I don't know if he had a secretary. It has my little address at the bottom, and he wrote me back. And it's a cherished item that I keep on my studio wall. So if I'm writing in a way that a sophomoric, younger composer wants to write a masterpiece, you want to be the next Mozart, that everything you pen becomes permanent. So a couple things. A, there is not hardly anything written today that is permanent. We can't tell in our own time what will be archived or what will people be listening to 500 years from now. Mm-hmm. And maybe they won't. As music has gotten wider and wider and more available, it's also gotten cheaper and dumber and less valued. I'm thinking about, there's a scene in the Outlander books and TV series where a harpist comes to visit the clan, and they file in, solemnly, and all sit in great appreciation for this wonderful treat of being able to hear live music. You know what I mean? And now, and my parents, we're busy as live musicians, and I've noticed over the course of my career a lot less live music and a lot less tuning into music. And understanding and being literate with it. And now with AI, and before AI, people desiring to sound like what sells, has kind of made it also available and cheapened it in a way that Eric Satie predicted it would happen, that music would turn to wallpaper. So living in that environment and wanting to feed my kids, I'm looking quite comfortable arranging or composing for the situation at hand. And so dropping that desire to be a master made me more of a master in a way, because I could be open to opportunities that I didn't see before. So I'm not sure exactly if I'm addressing your question, but on the composition side, my first album was called Out West. I'm still very proud of it. It was a solo piano piece, which I brought in a bass and drummer for to record it. I've also written an evening-length ballet called Who Done It, that's sort of a spoof on the Clue game. Other piano pieces, and I love doing that. The sad truth is that unless it's a commission, such as the ballet, just from the sales figures, there's not a lot of demand for it. People do not go to the search engine and write in Bradley Sowash originals. They type in Down by the Riverside. Oh, it's one by Bradley Sowash. See? So that's kind of how it works. In a way, I don't know if this is true or not. I was going to say I'd rather compose than anything else, but I'm going to back that off and say if 50% of arranging and 50% original, I'd be happy. In reality, I would say probably 90% of it's arranging now, because it's my trade. Does that sort of get to your question?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, all right.
I think one theme that I'm seeing come out, and I really love it. So I'm a musicologist. I love examining listening practices through the centuries. And this idea that, today we are inundated with a glut of, I think you used with Aaron Copland, you mentioned like the wallpaper aspect of having music in the background and your mom encouraging you to do that deep listening. What are you hoping that listeners are doing? What do you hope they're thinking about when they're listening to, whether it's a Bradley Sowash original or arrangement? What are you hoping they're doing to actively listen?
I liked that question a lot. I'm going to get a little woo here. It's hard to talk about your process because it can be so quickly sounding egotistical or that you're somehow special or genius or something like that. And so I'm a very humble musician who has the good fortune of having played so many styles, and because I love to get under the hood of styles and figure out what makes that style work, I'm able to access a lot of those sounds that come from that. Let's see. So that means I have a big toolbox. And again, the toolbox is secondary to the heart. And so I think that, at least in my case, that generative music makers are, for them, it's a calling. It really is like someone needing to be a preacher, or teachers often feel that. I just need to teach. And I can't imagine doing other things, but they wouldn't feel like me. And so as such, and here's where it gets woo-woo, I feel like when you're in that state of flow, where you forget to eat and you're staying up and not looking at the clock, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. and you're surfing on your unconscious. You can call it God if you want, or the spirit, but it can feel, and this is overstated, but it can feel a bit like the music is already there and your job is to discover it. I used to think about the metaphor as a miner, that there's the conscious mind, who is the miner, going down into the mine, which is the unconscious, and rooting around. And this is nothing that special. I would guess any of your listeners, as they're falling asleep, may have a little ditty going along in their head, or maybe even hear a whole wonderful orchestra sound. So the challenge then is to how do you turn that into something that's in the real world? How do you know how to arrange that brass sounds good in thirds and strings sound better in open voicings? That's the skill. But what I want listeners to feel is that they're connecting with the same stream that I did my best to capture, and like I said, getting the chills and feeling it. And one of the things I have heard all through my life as a performer, if people say, "Man, you really get into it." At my best performing, it's a recreation of that flow state where you're kind of lost in the moment. Your eyes are closed. It's not showy. You're just with the music, and it can almost feel like coming up for air. And there's some applause, maybe if you're in a concert setting, and you're kind of, okay, yeah, I'm here. Sort of like that feeling when you leave a great movie, and all of a sudden you're on the street, and you're like, oh yeah, there's a whole world.
100%.
Yeah, and I'm hungry, and that you notice that stuff.
Oh, I am sitting here holding myself from exploding because, this segment is about you, but a little bit of my background. I'm also a musician. I've been playing since I was a kid. I've been playing piano since I was a kid, and I play for a little theater company around here. I play for a church. I also play in different settings also. And great. I am 100% behind you in the fact that I truly believe that music already exists in the beyond, and all that we do is that we translate it through the instrument of our bodies and our souls and our hearts. Nice. So when you said that, and you said, this may be a little woo-woo, I am 100% behind that woo-woo. I honestly think, like you said, God, spirit, the universe, there's one stream of music that is constantly playing, and we're all surrounded by it. And our job as musicians is to simply tap into that stream and translate it through us so that we create something concrete from that one existing stream.
Well said.
I love that you said that.
And the beauty of it is it's going to come through the filter of you.
Right.
So that's why you're not going to write the same music as the next guy, even though you're tapping into the stream. So
100%.
Yeah. let me just throw this out. It's funny to think about concerts. Imagine, or the special music in church, let's say, where there's not singing along. I mean, where there it's the featured music. Let's say you went to a lecture in which the person behind the podium was speaking in a language that you did not speak, and you didn't know how to read it, and you'd never written in it at all, and you'd sit there and be mesmerized just by the flow of the words. In a way, that's what a concert is, right?
Yeah.
The difference is that in a lecture, that the person behind the podium would know, at least they would know what they're saying. And for musicians, we don't know why music works. Why is a major chord happy and a minor chord sad?
Yeah.
But why exactly? Well, it's a half step on, but why? Why does it hit us that way? I knew somebody who did Reiki. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's some kind of real edgy health practice where they work on bodies with their hands not touching, and sometimes the receiver is crying and everything, and whether it's fake or real, it does seem to have an emotional impact on the I don't want to call him a patient, the receiver, I guess. I asked this person that did it why it worked. How can you tap into deep emotions without even touching someone? And she said, I don't know how it works. It just does, so I use it. And I thought, you just described music,
Yeah, 100%.
So
This is all like Plato harmony of the spheres, right? I mean, all of existence kind of runs on that frequency. We're all aligned, we're all balanced and quote unquote in tune with these certain realities.
right, yeah, we could get really deep into that. And why does an octave and a fifth have sort of universal perfect mathematics, and a third and a sixth are a little bit off that, the physics of that. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. But I'm just happy to be able to participate in this amazing thing called music.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the questions that you pitched earlier was, what do you wish your younger self would have known about music that I know now? And I kind of touched on this earlier. It would be that a career in music for non-stars, it has to be wide, not deep. So I think I started out wanting to be a specialist. I guess I'm retracing ground, but when I go to schools as a guest artist, in like the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, where I was recently, or the Southern Methodist University Music Department, places like that, or I speak a lot at music conferences for educators, I say, you will be a teacher. You will be an educator. Mozart was an educator. Beethoven was an educator. But the hot bass player on a jazz major says, nah, not me. I'm just going to gig, man. And it's like, okay, come see me in 20 years. I know you're going to have a studio. So it's just good to know how to do everything. And that's what I would tell people on this path is to, keep your doors open and don't snub the music education majors and likewise the performance majors. You need to know about that too. It really helps to have chops. It really gives you a lot of credentials when you can play pretty well. You know what I mean? It's because anybody can talk like we're doing now, but if you can do it, yeah. So
1,000%. I mean, I know you're an advocate of comprehensive musicianship, and
yeah, well said.
That's it in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, and what that means for me, this gets back into education, is that there are many segments. If you can picture a wheel, there's reading the written note. There is the theory behind those notes. Why did Bach write this instead of this? Oh, sorry. Same notes, just one's an octave higher. Why would he have done that choice? And making questions like that, or why did Mozart do this? And when he could have done this, or this. And he might have wrestled with all three of those and said, oh, I like this one. So getting under the hood and knowing the theory of it, working with it and improvising it like I just did, working Mozart's ideas in your own way. What if you said, I got C major and G7 and an Alberti bass. What can I do with that? That makes a comprehensive musician who understands the theory, understands how to play the written note, and a comprehensive musician And by the way, there are other streams on that wheel that I haven't even touched on, such as the musicology, the historical context was written, and so on. But that all becomes a beautiful buffer so that when the inevitable mistakes flow and you need to practice the art of the cover-up, you understand the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, having gone through that process, and then you can get right through it. A lot of times pianists say to me, I'm just not an improviser, I can't improvise at all. And I'm like, you improvise every time you play. What? Okay, have you ever been on a gig when the fan came on and your music blew off the stand? What did you do? You survived a little bit. That's improv.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Or a page turn, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You figure it out. Pianists, almost more than any musician, are put in conditions where they have to improvise, because everybody else has a one-page sheet of music and we have 8,
Very true.
Yeah, we're talking about sacred music, and I obviously write a lot of educational resources and things for students. I write. I don't want to give the impression I just work in church on the publishing end, which I've already showed about my performance background. But in the publishing world, I have a whole body of work for educational string music, just to open up the improvisation. I've written lots of actually Christmas music for big band and choir. I've written a lot, probably about 2 hours of orchestra music that's Christmas, the sacred side of Christmas. Well, it's not all. A few of them are secular, but most of them are sacred side of Christmas. And then choir music. I have not a huge catalog of choir music. I don't know what reason that is. I just I guess no one asked. So, but I write that. I don't know, 8 or 10 arrangements for choir. So I almost have to look at my notes to see what all. I also have quirky things written for, solo bass and whatever. I love wearing many hats. So I don't want to give the impression that I just live and work only in the church sacred music setting, but quite a lot of my catalog is, I would say, maybe over 50% of it is in that world because of what I mentioned earlier about being sort of rescued from the ignore the pianist gig and going into environments where people really wanted to be moved and hear it. What a perfect setting for a musician who wants to communicate is a church where people, if you think about why are we there? We want something to happen. We want to feel something. It's not just learn something. That's part of it too, to explain this lesson and so on. But it's the feeling those ineffables that the musician can so tap into. I'd also like to acknowledge, as to your point, David, and your Stephanie, with your clarinet playing, it is always the nature of an interview that it's awkwardly focused on one person. If we were sitting around a table, we would be much more learning about each other and talking shop and sharing things. So I just want to put it out there. It's inherently sort of rudely egotistical to just talk about yourself, but that's the setting we're in.
You're the one we're here to learn about, so
100%. 100%.
Right.
I will just invite, if you want to share anything, any upcoming projects you have, or if you have a website you would like our listeners to check out.
Just to learn more about me and maybe tap more into my catalog, it's a simple website. It's my whole name, BradleySowash.com. That's BradleySowash. That's, I think, the only place where my complete catalog is available. Actually, I take that back because I do a lot of copywritten arrangements. So that stuff, even though it's listed there, is purchased at places like Sheet Music Plus, Sheet Music Direct, some of those big online retailers, because they own the copyrights to that. What am I looking forward to right now? I guess I'm going to just keep pushing out the pop, classical, and pop music arrangements for now because it is fall. I live on a farm. We have over 100 animals we take care of, and so this is a busy time of year where I'm repairing tractors and mowing and things like that. So I do most of my writing and teaching in the wintertime. And to get on the teaching, I do is teach capable pianists who are used to being readers to put their music away and play the music in their heart. And I do that under the sort of slogan of jazz for the rest of us. And my next class will be this winter. For the last, I've taught 38 courses in a row, all unique. So, like, for example, a course on Stride, a course that was all Gershwin. They always go through a theme like that. Several blues courses, it goes on. And I've done that for many years. I'm trying to think when I started that. Maybe since around 2016. And just recently, I stopped doing that year-round to just doing it, in the wintertime, just because of the farm demands and because just because I'm 65 and I don't want to work as hard. But it doesn't feel like that. I just fill it up with other stuff. Yeah, but I mentioned that, I guess, because any church musicians listening to this who have had an inclination to get sort of beyond the black and white notes, that have good chops and a reasonable theory background, if they know, without a lot of thought what a C major 7 is, that might be a good fit for them. And I'll throw out, just in my musical life, we do 2 concerts a year here at the farm with our family band. Both my girls are semi-professional musicians, and my brother sits in on piano, and we have a big picnic and play. So I keep pretty musically busy, even when I'm not officially busy.
In closing, do you have anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
Maybe I'll just play it out. Just give you some little more. I was showing that pentatonic thing. Let me see if I can get something going with that. On that a little bit. I'm making this ending up. So, thanks for your great questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Join us for The Chance of a Lifetime, our exploration of traditional hymn tunes and the people who made them.
Welcome. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Madison, thanks for coming along. Madison is going to join us each week to talk about a different public domain tune, its history, and how we can use the tune in worship today.
Absolutely. But first, in today's episode, I want to talk a bit about what public domain tunes are and why we use so many of them.
That feels like a good place to start. What exactly does it mean when something's in the public domain?
Not under copyright, so you don't need permission to use it. You can use it in any way, even altering it. You can look at public domain either as nobody owning a piece or everybody owning that piece collectively.
Very cool. That makes musicians' jobs really easy then.
Exactly. Building familiarity with public domain tunes and texts give musicians and worshipers a really big toolbox to provide music for any occasion.
Where do all of these public domain tools come from?
Well, tunes are often written at different times by separate composers and authors, though in some cases the composer and author can be the same person. And in some cases, the composer and author worked together.
So it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where the tune and the text have to fit together.
That's an easy way to think about it. As long as you have a tune and text that share the same edges, so to speak, you can pair that tune and text together. In fact, musicians have been playing a kind of mix and match game with public domain tunes and texts throughout the centuries. Church members have probably had the experience of hearing the same tune set to different texts.
Oh, can any text go with any melody?
Not really. You can tell which tunes and texts match by looking at the meter marking. Songs usually have a little series of numbers next to them, like 8-8, 88 or 8787. These numbers indicate the number of syllables in each phrase. So, for example, a song with a meter of 11, 11, 11, 5 would have 3 lines of 11 syllables followed by 1 line of 5 syllables. Any text and tune that have the same meter can fit together.
Well, all of these melodies and texts had to come from somewhere and be new at some time, right?
No doubt. The problem is, in some cases, we know exactly when, where, why, and how these songs were created, and in other cases, the knowledge is lost to history. We can do our best to guess based on surviving documentation, but without some definitive documentary evidence, we'll never really know.
I love a good mystery. Speaking of puzzlers, what are composers actually thinking about when they craft a new melody?
Well, they're probably thinking about different things like vocal range or how high or low the notes go so that they don't go beyond what the average congregation can do. They're also thinking about what rhythms and pitches emphasize certain words so that listeners will pay the most attention to those words.
Right. Composers have to strike a balance between letting us hear and think about the words, but making the melody interesting and beautiful enough to be worth singing.
Exactly. If the melody draws attention away from the text, it could lessen the song's spiritual impact. But if the melody is uninspiring, it has no impact at all. And the impact is the important part. The character of the music determines how we receive the words.
How we receive the words? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Really, what I mean is that the music guides how we think and feel about those words. If the music has an uplifting quality, we probably want to include something uplifting in the text. If the melody is more melancholy or pensive, we might use different text to match those qualities. Oh God, Our Help in Ages Past and the Gilligan's Island theme song share the same meter, so they technically fit together, but you probably don't want to sing that next Sunday.
This might be why I didn't become a composer.
It's a hard job for sure, but it's an important one, and we'll be talking about the legacy of some really important composers in this series, so stay tuned.
Let's get back to data basics. In each episode, we'll offer a mini tutorial about the One License website and how to secure copyright permissions. If you have a question about any aspect of copyright usage, please email the One License team at info@onelicense.net with the subject line Sacred Sounds. We'll answer as many questions as possible in future episodes.
Hello, it's good to be here. Hello.
Hi, Siobhan. Thanks for coming today. Very exciting to have you here for episode 1. So let's start off with just some very basics of searching the One License database. And just for all of our listeners playing along at home, you can search the One License database even before creating an account or buying a license. You just visit www.onelicense.net. That's one spelled out. And you'll see a search bar in the purple part of the screen. Now, Siobhan, I see a lot of ways to search. So there's some boxes to check, a list of hymnals I can choose from. What is the best way to use that search bar?
Right. That's a great question. We always recommend for most things that you search by entering into the title field the title of the work you want to use and the last name of the contributor for that work. The contributor can be the composer, the text author, the arranger, any artist. You don't necessarily want to search by title alone, nor do you want to search by entering the title of the work into the title field and then clicking on the contributor delimiter under the title search bar. Those two ways won't necessarily yield the best results. So in the title bar, in the title search bar, you want to enter the title and the contributor's last name together. And that should yield a match in the first 5 to 6 results, if not the first result.
Well, okay, but when I do searches, I get pages and pages of search results that all look the same. How do I actually pick out which of those results is the right one?
Right. So if you're getting more than 5 or 6 reasonable matches, if you're getting screens and screens that you have to look through, and you're not seeing the first few, 5 or 6 as matches, then take another look at your search parameters and make sure that you've entered the title and the contributor's last name into that title bar. If you do a title contributor search, you shouldn't get an overwhelming number of results. And then from those first 5 or 6 results, look for a match between your hymnal or score and the database returns for title, contributor, and copyright holder.
So those 3 things.
Correct. Right.
Excellent. Okay. Now, what do I do if I see like kind of a match? So sometimes I see an extra contributor name listed in the One License database that isn't listed in my hymnal.
I would say that if the contributors are not a match, then that's probably not the correct database record for the copyrighted work that you want to use.
What happens if it goes the other way? So I see extra contributor names in my hymnal that aren't listed in the database.
Yeah, in that case, it might be that you need to do an additional search, and we can talk about that in our next episode. How does that sound?
That sounds like a plan. You gave us a lot to think about, so we're going to start searching, and we'll get ready to use the database together.
Great.
Thanks, Siobhan.
Okay, see you, Steph.
Thank all of you so much for joining us on this inaugural episode of Sacred Sounds. It was a treat for the One License team to have these conversations, and we're looking forward to many more like them. Next time, David and I will host a liturgical listening party featuring one of Bradley Sowash's compositions, so be sure to join us if Bradley's interview piqued your interest. Madison will also be here offering some fascinating insights into Gustav Holst's Thaxted, and Siobhan will follow up on that promise to refine our One License database searches. Until then, Lord, open our lips and our mouths will give you praise.